So without further ado, very excited to introduce this panel. I have Paul Brackey, who is Senior Director for Sales and Expos at Chicago Event Management, produces some of the largest races in really in the country, and especially the Midwest. We have Suzanne Neve, who is the CEO of FFEA, Florida Festivals and Events Association. And Susie Wertz is the Executive Director of the WSCCI, which is the West Suburban Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So very excited to hear they've all produced some manner of virtual and or hybrid events in 2020, and really excited to hear their learnings from the best practices and especially what things could create bottlenecks if you're new to producing virtual and hybrid events to help people avoid any pitfalls that may arise. So I'd love to start with Susie. So if you could give a bit about your organization and just about what your what types of events you were producing in 2020.
Sure. So we are a Chamber of Commerce, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with what that is. A little bit of the difference in our entity versus others is we are a regional chamber, so we cover 8 or 9 communities on any given day. Very diverse communities. From our members range from manufacturers to hotels to restaurants to financial advisors to you name it. So we serve a wide variety. And one of our biggest and best events of the year is our Health and Wellness Fest, which we have typically done every September for the last 5 years. And of course, it's always been in person at a large expo center. And we have about 60 to 70 vendors who are all our members. And it's our largest business to consumer event as well. So there was no way this year we were going to be able to pull it off in person, but there's also no way we were going to be able to not hold this event. It draws 500 attendees from all those communities that I told you about. It's free to attend. The booths are purchased, and it's also a major revenue generator for us in the form of sponsorships. So that was the event that we converted to a virtual offering through EventHub. Do you want me to keep going, or shall we each introduce? And
I'd love to pass it around. Yes, Suzanne, go, and then we'll have Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Suzanne Neve. I'm the CEO for the Florida Festivals and Events Association. We are a membership-based association for individuals, organizations, and entities who produce what we refer to as community events. Not all of our events are outdoor, but we don't have like your typical like corporate or social planner. Most of our members are producing larger scale festivals and events. So we as an organization act as a resource for them. If you're with any of the other FEA orgs, you're very familiar with what we do. We do a lot of smaller scale regional networking events throughout the year that we've transitioned in 2020 over to Zoom or to the EventHub platform. And then we do a larger scale annual conference with typically around 400 people. This year in August, we did do a smaller scale version of that in person. Instead of 400, we had about 85 there. And then we did the following week a full scale virtual conference with over 400. So that's kind of our 2020 in a nutshell.
Paul, you're up.
All right. So Paul Brackey, Chicago Event Management. So our company helps produce or does produce the Bank of America Chicago Marathon, Bank of America Shamrock Shuffle, a few other running related events throughout the year that will hopefully be coming online after we get through this situation. And then we do have a race management program that we host and produce here in Chicago typically. And then again, various other smaller projects throughout the calendar year.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to dive in, since you've all done events. What were the biggest bottleneck areas? What were the aspects of the production of virtual and hybrid that took either longer than you thought they would, or just take a long time, and people should be very aware to build that into their planning portion? And I'm going to start with Paul and then go in reverse order back around.
Sure. I think the biggest thing for us was, one, obviously finding a solution, a platform like this to host our virtual event on, and then getting to know it, getting our hands dirty in it, and then figuring out what exactly our strategy would be to use the event. So several of our team members got involved, obviously, with that. Our marketing and communications team definitely were huge help to help us figure out how best to do it, and then again how best to do it in a quality way for year one for us and to test it. Like, we wanted to obviously have a great experience, but we also didn't want to get in over our heads with production. So we tried to keep it lean and good quality content and well produced. So, kudos to our team for doing that. I think we did a really good job managing that aspect of it, because I think adding too much more to what we did for this first kick at the cat and getting to know the system, and we also controlled the number of exhibitors and sponsors to some extent to not have, obviously we don't want 200 exhibitors for our first event, but we managed about 28 of them, and that seemed a pretty good manageable number for year one. And again, for us to get to know the system, how it works, work with our sponsors and exhibitors, and then help our participants, figure out our consumer base, how to use the system.
And Suzanne, your perspective is very interesting because you both produced a live event with almost 100 people and then did a virtual back-to-back. So what was that like in terms of bottlenecking? And for a lot of folks that will be looking to do a live and virtual component, how would you recommend they massage those together?
Yeah, so I think for us, the biggest hurdle initially was figuring out what our members were looking for and what they wanted, and then also what they were both physically and financially able to do. So we did a lot of surveying, a lot of research, and then put together a task force. And so that really did take up a pretty large chunk of time, but we felt that was super important because we wanted to make sure we were producing a product that was relevant and then what people were looking for. And once we kind of had laid out that groundwork and that plan and essentially rewritten all of our strategic objectives and our entire budget for the year, that really put in place the forward motion for us to do this, hybrid event where it was 1 week in person and the following week virtual. They essentially became two very distinct and separate events from each other. And that's why I do say this when I do my hybrid, because they were very different from each other. And I think in terms of our virtual component, the biggest bottleneck there that really took a lot more time than I had anticipated it would was speaker preparation and the production side of the actual educational sessions for us. Because, in a normal situation where you have an in-person conference, it's worrying about okay, can we get them their flight in time? And, can we fit within their schedule? Does their topic fit within our learning objectives? Well, now it was not only does their topic fit within the learning objectives, but okay, are we doing it live? Are we doing it recorded? What does the production look like? And because this was all relatively new to everyone, not just us, there was a lot that went into speaker education leading up to the event as well, too. So I think that was, once we got through what we wanted to do and figured all that out, then kind of that speaker prep was the next biggest hurdle for us.
And Susie, whereas your event didn't focus so much on programming so much as focusing on the expo itself, you directed a lot of your efforts to training the exhibitors. Is that correct? Can you talk a bit to your different bottleneck areas and how you avoided them?
Yeah, so, we were trying to, mimic an in-person trade show, basically, to the best of our ability with this platform, and thought it was going to be the best opportunity for the vendors to get to know people, to have people actually come into their booth and speak to them and find out about their health and wellness products and services. And the end result was great. I think the bottleneck or the learning curve, or what we would have done differently, was the ramp up to get them the booth personnel familiar with the way it worked. We did do a dress rehearsal, and just about everybody did attend that. Probably we could have done 2 or 3 dress rehearsals, or even maybe individually, because they didn't understand what happened when someone came in the booth. And it would have been really cool to have a actual person walk in and say, hey, tell me about your fruit smoothie or whatever it is. So I think that we maybe a little more education and prep on that side, as well as building of their booth. So we built our chamber booth first to try to find out where the hiccups were going to be, which was really helpful, so that we kind of knew how to do it. And we offered our own help. And, you guys, EventHub had a lot of great tutorials. Again, I think maybe if we had almost done a session to show them step by step what you need to do, how you upload a video, how do you put in a logo or an item and such like that. So probably a lot in the prep. And our event itself was only 3 hours long, so we weren't days like some of the other events.
That makes sense. And then in terms of the programming, I want to dive back into that a little bit. So there's two general approaches to it. One is doing a total live stream where you have people that are broadcasting like we are today. And the alternative to that is you have pre-recorded video, which is its own beast, essentially. Talk to a little bit if you did pre-recorded video for your Suzanne and Paul. Maybe we'll start with Suzanne and then go to Paul. In terms of what that production process looked like, how you coordinated, deadlines that you gave speakers are very important for that as well, right? To be able to iterate and edit anything that needs to be edited.
Yeah, absolutely. This was, like I mentioned, a huge chunk of our time. We did quite a bit of research as an organization prior to kind of starting to vet our speakers. And what we ultimately decided, and I think it's just so unique to every organization and their situation, but for us, I'm a staff of one. We utilize interns and volunteer committees to help us on a normal basis. And our plan initially, and what we followed through with, was to run 5, when we were doing our breakout sessions, we were running 5 simultaneous breakout sessions at a time. And so I knew myself, I was not comfortable managing the technology aspect of 5 live sessions as one person. So what we did was we gave each of our speakers the option of doing either simu-live, where they pre-recorded but were available in the chat during the time that the session played back, or doing live. And then once we knew what each speaker was doing, we went in and set our schedule such that one of the sessions was live and the other 4 were simu-live. And that gave me the opportunity and the confidence that if there was a technical issue, that we would be able to handle it. And we had volunteer moderators in every single session. So if a session was simu-live, then the speaker was required to go in at the very beginning and introduce themselves through the chat, and just say, hey, I'm your speaker. The session was pre-recorded, but I'm here for the next 30 minutes while the session plays back to answer questions. They had questions queued up to ask the audience through the chat if they found that engagement was low. And so we actually had a really high engagement level through the chat on our simu-live sessions, and actually even more so than some of our live sessions, just because with us limiting the session time to only 30 minutes, the speaker had more time to give content if the session was pre-recorded, because the questions were being answered in real time for the chat. They didn't have to dedicate that time at the end. But what that meant was a pretty intense education on our part in terms of educating speakers on how to do that, how to record through Zoom. So we set up a virtual speaker green room that had orientation videos like what Susie talked about, what you would do with your exhibitors. We did the same thing with our sponsors on here's how you log in, here's how you record your video. We gave every speaker a branded template for their PowerPoint so that everything looked consistent and matched. And that really, I feel like, went a long way for us in terms of making sure that from the production side, while we don't have a huge budget to go rent a studio and have everyone in person to record these, it still looked like a nice, clean presentation.
Paul, stuff to add on that?
Yeah, I think, we were in that same mindset of trying to control it as much as we could, and knowing that we did a limited number of main stage presentations for this year. We did actually control it by working with a local vendor. We actually got a pretty good deal during this pandemic we're in. They didn't have very many people booked in the studio, obviously, so we were able to get and a lot of our sponsor partners, from Gatorade, PepsiCo, and Abbott, and Advocate, and things like that, people and Athletico that are local to Chicago. So they were able to drive in for the day, so that we could basically control the setting, the audio, the video, and it ended up being, speaking for Janet on our team, but I think it ended up being a lot easier because there hopefully wasn't as much editing on the back end, because we could, if they were on site to see things that they liked or didn't like, or could kind of cut and reshoot live or in person with them. So there's hopefully probably a little bit of less back and forth on the back end. It was pretty final once we got it done videotaping in person. And
I'm going to start with you, Paul, and then work back around to Susie. in terms of what you're going to, what are one or two things that you're doing different operationally or making more of an emphasis on operationally heading into 2021 with your programming?
With virtual? Yeah.
With virtual and general production of your events, yeah.
Yeah, so obviously, keeping virtual ideas and at the forefront for, whether it's a contingency plan or a hybrid, having it part of the plan from the get-go, which obviously it was not in 2020 for most all of us, but now having it part of the plan and strategy to move forward into 2021 events. I think, the other part, that we're going to probably do is consolidate the number of days a little bit, operationally, just, creating similar amounts of content, but just not having as long of a calendar for our virtual expo, and kind of mimicking the in-person. So probably 2 to 3 days versus, we did 7 this year for our virtual experience to match up with the window of time that a runner could, participate in the virtual experience. But I think, tightening up that engagement opportunity for the sponsors, the exhibitors, and our consumers, our running community, to give them a little bit shorter window to hopefully create a little bit more of an engagement opportunity amongst themselves too, and within the booths. So
that makes sense. And the benefit of that too is that it's less live period to control essentially for your team. But at the same time, I think we've all found that people have gone back and watched things like replays and watched on-demand content on their own time later. And that's been an emphasis as well, right?
Yeah, definitely for us. And that's how we positioned our first event was to, we had one broadcast in the morning. I think it was 11 a.m. every day. We had the new content, and then we rebroadcasted on the main stage at 5, which I think we could do more throughout the day, obviously broadcasting, making use of that main stage space. But then we created an expo booth for, basically main stage content where they could basically go in and on demand watch any of the broadcasts after they were aired. So Mondays, we put it up there Monday evening, and then at the end of every day, we published it basically for people to watch. So it was still live the first time, on each day at 11, but then they could access it later in the week or at their own leisure if they couldn't get on, every day at 11 kind of deal.
Yeah. Suzanne, did you find equal success with folks watching the recorded videos later on after the session had been scheduled?
Yeah, so that was part of the appeal for us, and one of the reasons why we tried to mimic as much as possible in terms of educational content what our members would see if they were at our live in-person conference, which is 5 concurrent sessions, tracked essentially for festival and event producers. And so we felt really confident that by using this format and kind of sticking to that with all the sessions being recorded, that they could then go back and watch it. And then what we've been able to do as an organization too is pull that content and sell it as tracks, even for people that weren't registered for the actual conference. So it's still generating revenue for us 3 months later, and hopefully we'll continue to do so as long as that particular content is relevant.
That makes sense. Susie, love your thoughts on this as well. And it doesn't have to be about just the expo you used us for, but you have a lot of other scheduled monthly, I think, and weekly and different programmatic things. So what did you do in terms of having live speakers versus recorded, things like that?
Well, just one thing I would say about our fest versus, what you guys said is, and Paul particularly, I think for ours, we would actually probably lengthen it rather than shorten it. I think, but like I said, we were only a couple of hours. I think and that's what our typical fest is about 3 or 4 hours. I might lengthen it just a little bit to give people more. I think once they got comfortable too with the format and understanding how you can go from booth to booth, that would be a lot more beneficial. Second thing that I would note too is the metrics. A lot of our booth people, the booth vendors were interested in knowing how many people came in, and so the fact that we could embed the Google Analytics tracking code was huge. And after the event, I was able to show a lot of value to our vendors and sponsors by showing them. Maybe they didn't actually even come in your booth, but they visited the fest and they saw your information and they were able to click on some things. So those are 2 points I wanted to make that were very, very beneficial in going into the future. We would probably do that again. As far as our events, we do things like new member showcases, where when we get new members to join, they're able to, you know, in a normal world, we would do a showcase of say 20 or 30 members. They have their little expo table and they get to tell people about their services, and all the members get to visit. That would be a great opportunity for a format like this. We do breakfast at the bar 3 times a year, which is, we use one of our members and we get all the people, the new members around to tell them about their benefits. That would be another this would be a very effective way of communicating that. And I like the idea of what you two guys said too, about then reporting it and being able to show it at a later time to people who aren't able to be there. We do a state of the chamber, state of the region, where we have lots of legislators and all of our municipal leaders on. That's another idea. This year we did it as just a pure 1-hour video, kind of a Zoom thing that I recorded, and we threw it up on YouTube afterwards. But I think something like this would be a lot more interactive, perhaps. There's a lot of, I think if you have an event that was in person, I mean, surely there are some exceptions to the rule, but this format would work well for many of them. I think it's just using a little bit of your creative brain of how does it look different enough so that you're not trying to be the exact same as you would be in person. Because I don't think, if people are measuring one against the other, it's very difficult to come out on top if you don't do something different.
Absolutely. And we have a couple great questions. I think the first is from Carly, and then the second was from Taylor. So, Paul, do you want to expand on that in terms of your engagement and if you're planning around that for next year?
Yeah. So, we did 7 days, Monday through Sunday. Usually our race would have been on Sunday, but our 5K is on Saturday. But again, kicking off the race week, virtual experience race week on Monday seemed to be, a lot of good traffic. People were excited, I think to get ready for that, whatever races they were going to do. A lot of them did more than one distance. So we saw a lot of energy around that. Anytime you kind of kicking off or launching kind of the opening ceremonies type of deal, I think that was a lot of it. And then again, then on the weekend, which would have been race weekend, Saturday and Sunday, when a lot of people obviously were doing their longer, especially the longer runs that take more time in the day, we saw more engagement then on that, which again would have been what our traditional expo would have been, Friday and Saturday. So I think in our industry, runners are just kind of used to that cadence of Friday, Saturday type expo, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday is the expo and getting ready for the event weekend, and then the event day of Sunday. So I think their internal clocks are just set like that, wired that way, and I think I think we'll look to do that more again. For our 2021 events.
Whatever you like to tag on to that, or should we jump to the next question? There's 2 great questions I want to make sure we get to. We have about 5 minutes left. So the next one is specifically for Suzanne. It's related to how much did you set your virtual badge fees at for your conference? And then did you consider, so I know because I attended as well, that the content was free for paid registrants after the event. Did you charge for anyone who missed the actual event but wanted replay access, and what did you charge for that if it was different?
Yeah, so the way our membership structure is set up for us as an organization is you can join as an individual for one rate, or you can join as an organization for about double that price, but it includes everyone from your organization. So one of the great things that came out of our task force that I was talking about earlier was the recommendation that we structure the virtual conference similar to how our membership pricing is, just so that to avoid the sharing of passwords or everyone sitting around a conference room with one login. And so we did that, and we've had about 85% of our registrants actually use that organizational pricing. So for us, it was $195 for an individual or $295 for everyone within your company that was a member of the organization. And then the way that we did, and then you got all of the content, even the recorded content, for a year, basically. They have access to that. And then what we did for the playback, we separated it out by tracks. So for instance, there's a sponsorship track, an event ops track, so on and so forth. So each track is available now for a year with their login and password. Once they purchase it, the cost for one track is $75, or if you purchase all 5 tracks, then it's $195, which is what the price would have been for the regular conference registration.
So that's a member driving thing, and that sounds like something that could be applicable to chambers as well. Are you adding new content to those tracks periodically throughout the year as well?
We are not adding new content. So we do use a learning management system that houses all of our content. So we don't specifically add content to those tracks within the learning management system, but we are adding content to the learning management system, if that makes sense. So yes and no, basically.
Thank you.
Yep.
Now, if you'd like more afterwards, I'm happy to connect you with Suzanne after this.
Yeah, I'll put my email in the chat.
Thanks. And then, Susie, this is a good question to kick to you first, and then probably back to Paul because it's more consumer event focused. What's been the largest groups of booths and exhibitors you've had? How much time did you devote to communicating with those folks to get them onboarded ahead of the event?
Yeah. Well, this event, I think we had 30 booths, 25 or 30 exhibitors or booths. I would say, if I had to estimate, we did a lot of communication via email first. They get the communication, they've signed up for their booth. Okay, now you're going to do this, and the other steps that EventHub had given you. And then we did, like I said, the pre-run, the dry run. Let me think. I would say we'd probably devote an hour to 2 hours per booth, which is kind of a lot. If you have 30, that was 60 hours, and we have 3 staff people. But some of it is quickly replicable from person to person. But it was, I think in the end, it's well worth giving them a lot of information up front and letting them ask the questions of you once they try it themselves.
And one thing we've started offering as a service is a facilitated dress rehearsal, so a live dress rehearsal period to really get everyone funneled through that we can help to take some of that off your hands, hopefully, along the way. That's Susie was one of our early adopters, so she fortunately, was a guinea pig and helped us really identify some of these best practices that we wanted to build around. So we have about 2 minutes left. Any final thoughts, last words?
No, I just was going to say I think the platform worked really well for us, and we're looking to continue the use in the future, and just we look forward to working with Michael and your team to take it to the next level, really, on how I think a lot of us have the same issues and situations that we'd like to improve upon for our exhibitors, sponsors, and attendees especially. So look forward to making it even better in the future.
Thanks, Paul.
I just want to give a quick recommendation for something that we did that we're finding is working really well. And that so we used EventHub for our virtual trade show, and for that we actually every dues-paying member that was the supplier side automatically got a booth. And so what we essentially have done is taken our existing supplier directory from our website and are replacing it with our EventHub page. So while, yes, it was a little bit of work on the front end for both us and for our members, it's now going to be much more interactive than our existing supplier directory, which is literally just like their logo and a link to their webpage. So, and then we can continue to kind of use that throughout the year too, if we're doing an event like this that would be, on a smaller scale from our annual event too. So just take that into consideration too if you're looking at the platform, if there's a way to repurpose it.
Yeah.
And